right. Hi, everybody. We are coming at you tonight with two awesome authors who I absolutely love both their books, Shelley Parker Chan and Andrea Stewart. So Shelley is an Australian by way of Malaysia and New Zealand. She's a 2017 Otherwise Fellow and is the author of the historical fantasy novel She Who Became the Sun, which is awesome and right here. So she also spent nearly a decade working as a diplomat and international development advisor in Southeast Asia, where she became addicted to epic East Asian historical TV dramas. After a failed search to find English language book versions of these stories, she decided to write her own. She currently lives in Melbourne, Australia, which is where she is now. And then we have Andrea Stewart, and she is the daughter of immigrants and was raised in a number of places across the United States. Her parents always emphasized science and education, so she spent her childhood immersed in Star Trek and odd-smelling library books. When her admittedly ambitious dreams of becoming a dragon slayer didn't pan out, that's an awesome dream though, Andrea, she instead turned to writing books. She is the author of the Drowning Empire series, the first one of which is The Boneshard Daughter, which is right here. It's out in paperback, guys. You can find it in the store on our virtual event display area next to Shelley's, and also on my summer staff picks because it's just that awesome. And and the second book in this series, The Boneshard Emperor, is releasing on November 9th of this year. She now lives in sunny California, and in addition to writing, can be found herding cats, looking at birds, and falling down research rabbit holes. So we are actually coming at you from 3 different time zones tonight, guys. So for anyone on the Eastern Coast, with me, it's 7 p.m. Andrea off in California, it is 4 p.m. And for Shelley, she is in the future for us. It is tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. for her right now. So welcome, both of you. I am so excited to have you here tonight, like so excited.
Very excited to be here. Thank you.
All right. So let's kick this off with, let's first talk about the ins and outs of both She Who Became the Sun and then the Drowning Empire series, Boneshard Daughter. So for those watching who don't know really about these books, can you each tell us a little bit about what your books are about and the initial spark that set you off on writing it?
Who's going to go first? Do you want me to go first? Yeah. All right. So She Who Became the Sun, it's a queer reimagining of the rise to power of the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty in China. And you don't need to know any history to enjoy it. It's set in the 14th century, which is a time when China was being ruled by the Mongols, who ruled pretty much everywhere in the world back then. And in history, there was this guy who was a peasant. He was like a nobody. And he just kind of woke up one day. I was like, you know what? I'm really destined for greatness. Like, who thinks that? And he was a monk, and then he became a rebel commander. And then he kicked the Mongols out of China, and he became the emperor. And I was like, okay, well done, dude. And I thought it'd be really interesting if we took this incredibly ambitious, tyrannical man and made it the story of someone who wasn't a man. Because I think there's a lot of really interesting things to tease out about the patriarchy and maybe what happens when you make that position of supreme male power be held by someone who's not a man.
Well, it is an awesome book. So Andrea, can you tell us a little bit about the Boneshard Daughter or anything, either teasers for the next one or anything?
Sure. So the Boneshard Daughter is an Asian-inspired epic fantasy. And it is multi-POV, so it follows several characters. There's a daughter who's trying to reclaim her rightful place as heir. There's a smuggler who professes not to care but can't seem to stop doing good things. There's 2 women in an established relationship who are struggling with the class differences between them. And then there's also a stranger on a remote island who's trying to unravel the mystery of why she's there. So I don't have like this historical background for mine. I basically made a lot of this stuff up, but I did want to write about an empire that was on the brink of revolution. I wanted to set it in an archipelago of islands, and they happen to be migratory, which does affect some of the story and also the way people live there. I wanted to do a cool magic system, so I have a magic system in there that's inspired a little bit by computer programming. And for me, growing up, I just loved the stories that had magical animal companions. So I threw one of those in there as well. So, yeah.
That is so awesome. And I just wanted to say for Shelley, I remember reading when I got the arc of She Who Became the Sun that you were trying to like it was like a mesh of this idea of like an East Asian soap opera thing when you started writing it. Was that like I mean, I get that obviously the history part, but like there is some aspects of like, wow, this is like really awesome and it would totally work as a soap opera. And it was just so great to have those moments where I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's like based on TV shows. Like it's like Marvel mashed with like Chinese historical dramas. Just like wanted to have fun, right?
I know, right? And it really reads that way. It is a lot of fun. So actually, we do have quite a few people watching, and one of them actually has a question for you, Shelley. She's wondering, and I'm actually wondering this too, because I was under the impression that this was a standalone. Is there a book two to this? Or?
There is. So it quite matches Andrea's series. Like, so I call the duology the Radiant Emperor duology. So we both have a bit of an emperor theme happening. So my second book does not have a title yet. Well, it has a placeholder title, which has been yelled on the internet in a few places, but it's not official yet. Yeah, so that is coming. I'm working on it right now.
I am so excited. I don't know why, but I thought this was a standalone. It does read very nicely as like beginning, middle, end, and that. But I am so excited to hear there's another one.
Yeah, well, because you don't know how many you're going to write at the start. You know, when you go to pitch a project to a publisher, you're like, well, could be a standalone. Or like maybe they want 3, or maybe they want 2. So I tried to make it be a standalone if it had to be.
That is, I mean, it works that way. I'm ecstatic that there's going to be more. I was ecstatic when Andrea's was like a trilogy. I was like, yes, more of all of those things.
Have you finished book 3, Andrea? Oh, sorry. Is that a painful question?
I mean, it is a painful question. I have finished writing it, but I need to go and do a read through. I've just been like, I keep writing stuff. So, you know, it's like, I'm like, well, what if I did it this way? Maybe this would be better. So, yeah, I'm at that stage.
Look at our fixed grimaces of the authors who are stuck in revision.
This is the writer's process of revision. Just
crying.
So I have a question for each of you for selling both of your books. So obviously, as booksellers, we're always trying to sell, like the best way to sell the books we love. And, you know, I just, you know, talk about these constantly. But if you were in front of like really excited readers, how would you each sell your books to them?
Oh boy. I find that always so difficult because I feel like I just kind of stumble over my words a lot. I'm much better about doing it online. So I usually tell people like, oh, like if you like a failing empire that's on the brink of revolution, and you like the idea of migratory islands and like monstrous constructs that are powered by Boneshard magic, and you know, the magic system inspired by computer programming, and then also magical animal companions. I'm like, oh, if you like any of those things, then maybe you'll like my book. But in person, I don't know if I could do that.
That works for me. I can tell that to people. I'll be like, yes, all of these things, and it's all in one book. Isn't that great? It's like, oh my goodness. How would you?
Yeah, I feel like.
Yeah, go ahead.
The list of tropes. No, just like Andrew's like writing the list of things. Like that's often how we like sell the books. It's just like, do you like this? Do you like that? Like, you know, come along. And on the internet, I would say something extremely different than I would ever say in person. Because on the internet, I have long been like, do you like books with a lot of sexy kneeling and male humiliation? And that does not work on all audiences. So I usually do not pull that one out in public. I can't tell if this is the internet space or a real space. So, yeah. If I'm speaking to someone in a bookstore, I might say something like, do you like Revenge of the Genderqueers over the heteropatriarchy? You know, do you want to see things go smash? You want to see the underdog who rises to power and like just crushes everyone in her way, you know, with ruthlessness and backstabbing and yearning. And it's just really fun, you know?
Yep. That would that would be a perfect pitch in our store. We have a really big LGBTQ plus community. So they're always, and we actually have a Rainbow Reads book club that's out of us, that they read specifically books that focus on anything. I mean, they read all genres, but it focuses on queer something. Like something has to be, you know, in that area of it, which is really cool. And I'm like, I'd love to be like, hey, read She Who Became the Sun, but they can't because they have to read paperbacks and not hardcovers. So so we'll have to wait until yours is out in paperback. But yes, so that would actually work great. Oh, and actually it looks like the person that asked Shelley about is their book too. Her name is, at least on the YouTube thing, it's Nary Sims. She's wondering if there's an ETA for your book, for your second book.
Painful questions. Thank you. My child keeps asking me, oh, you know, are you starting book 3 already? And I'm like, oh, don't ask me. I'm still writing the second book. It is due fairly soon, so I am working hard on that. I think the current pub date is October 2022, so next year.
So yeah, so that makes sense. Yes. Yes. So actually, the same person, Nari Sim, she actually says, your book, Shelley, it reminds her of the Chinese historical dramas she grew up watching, or they grew up watching. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's female or male or whatever. And it's girl pretends to be man to survive, all that stuff. So I think she really likes it. She really liked it. They really liked it. Sorry. And then we also have another person who just, Amelia Laughlin, she's very excited about this. She says, 2 such amazing authors, and this is so exciting. So she's very excited that you guys are here, as I'm very excited that you guys are here. I
was like, oh yeah, it's just a single book. And I started writing it. I was like, oh, this would be a Lord of the Rings length book, and I'm not cut out for that. So I chopped it into 3 because trilogies were hot back then, which was about 10 years ago. And then I sort of finished the first one, and then we went out on sub, and it was like, yeah, how many will they buy? And I'm glad in the end that Tor was like, oh, 2 books is sort of like where it's at right now in the publishing space. And actually 2 is a really nice number because yeah, book 2s are hard and you're kind of wrung out by the end. And so by the time you're done, you're like, yeah, okay, 2 is a good number. So it was an interesting process to kind of change your planning because it had been a full arc over 3, and to squish it down to 2 did take a bit of shuffling. But I think it becomes stronger because you have to really think about the parts of your story and make them all balance. So
that is so cool. So speaking of the duology thing with Andrea, I did actually have a question for you because yours is a trilogy, correct?
Right.
And you're right. Duologies are a big thing right now. So Andrea, why did you want to do a trilogy? Did you initially think you were going to do a trilogy?
Yeah, that was actually the initial plan. I mean, the first one has its own arc and everything, but it doesn't. There's very clearly more story to be told by the end of it. So when we shopped it around, we basically shopped it as as 3 books. And I had the first book completed, and then I just wrote like summaries for what was going to happen in book 2 and book 3, and then we sent that out. So that was the plan. So there was like, the one arc for the first book, and then for the second book, and then the third, but then there's that overarching arc for the 3 books. So hopefully it all works out as I plan. We'll see.
Which is the hardest one to write, Andrea? Is it 2 or 3?
I don't even know. At this point. I thought for sure, like after I wrote the first book, because I had been writing many, many books before this and getting rejected. But that first one I wrote in just a few months, and at that point I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. I know how to write books now. And then book 2, oh, that was a struggle. I think it's a lot harder to write like a book 2 if you've never done it before. And what I'm realizing now is it's a lot harder to write a book 3 if you've also never done that before. It's just there's so many things to hold on your head at that point, and like plot threads that you need to make sure are tying up and interweaving correctly. It becomes a little bit messy.
I do feel like that is like more of a philosophical writing question. Is writing 2 books or 3 books harder to do? Is it harder to just write one? I don't know.
Like some authors don't have to tie up all the threads. I think Naomi Novik once said, I just like leave a lot of interesting things in there that I can pick up or use or not. And I was like, oh wow, you can do that?
You can just do
just all these little like threads untucked. But it works.
It's like it's like you can just do that. It's like, I don't know, maybe. It's like the philosophy of writing, guys, like
I just feel like after book 3, somebody's going to be like, but she never addressed this. And I'll be like, oh my God, I didn't address that.
Which of course they will, because that's what the internet is for.
But I want it to be intentional.
Not a single nitpick go unnitpicked by the internet. But at the same time, it's fiction. It's not a watertight argument. We're not arguing a thesis.
No. All right, I just wanted to pop in because you guys are getting a lot of comments, and a lot of them are very nice, and I love them. So Neri's back. She said that she finished your book, Shelley, in one day. It was so good, and she says both of your books are so good. So I just thought you guys should know that. Also, we have Helen. She says both of you are so inspiring, and she loves to see more East Asian stories by East Asian authors on shelves. She says, thank you both for writing the tales I so desperately need and for inspiring me to keep writing.
Thank you.
That's so sweet.
Thank you, guys.
But yes, and I totally agree with all of that, by the way. It was so great. All right, so next up, I did want to just get into the differences there are obviously a lot of connectors between your books. Actually, the revolution thing, I didn't even think about that, Andrea, but it's true. Yours may be a fantasy world, but it's still like a revolution. And yes, Shelley, yours is more historical based, but there's like this, somebody's going to take over and or change things up. And it's so great. So, but obviously, Shelley, yours is is historical fantasy. It is based on like a real place, a real time. Like, obviously, there's fantastical elements in it because there are ghosts and the mandate of heaven and all that stuff. But yours is a little more it just basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is because for Andrea, all of your stuff it's an Asian inspired fantasy world, but it is still kind of one that it didn't exist before you imagined it. Whereas Shelley, your time and place, they're real time and place. Like, it's a real thing. So do you basically what am I trying to say? So would you both classify your books that way? And then also, Shelley, did you find it harder or easier? Like, which one do you, historical fantasy or just regular fantasy? What are the challenges, the difficulties, the differences, maybe? Just
the philosophical questions again, which is harder? I can only say what works for me. I'm naturally drawn to the what if questions. I am really inspired by just reading situations or reading media and just thinking, what if you change this one thing? How would it go? So I call my book History Fanfic. It's just I found this thing in history that was really cool. And I was just I want to make it my own. I want to subvert it. I want to twist it. I want to put the queerness in there. I want to see, I will play with it. I like playing in an existing sandbox, and I like being in conversation with an existing thing. All fiction, I guess, is in conversation with texts around it. But I like to sort of make that explicit. And I'm not so much a wildly imaginative person, which drives my agent to despair when they're like, think up new ideas. I'm like, I have no ideas. I have to encounter something that inspires me. Which is quite hard because you don't know when you're going to find something that's fun. So I don't think of my book as a historical fantasy so much, but that's because I didn't write it as a fantasy. I wrote it as a Chinese palace drama, and that kind of has its own genre conventions, and it doesn't have magic, but it's told in a very fantasy register, which is, heightened emotions, big stakes, revenge, betrayal, all those things that we think of as elements of Western fantasy. But it's set in a sort of semi-realistic world, but it's also aiming for a catharsis of emotion you don't find in contemporary realism. people get to be the emperor, and that's amazing. And that's not something I would advocate for in real life, or attempt in a contemporary novel. So it feels like a fantasy, but I had no magic. So I brought it to Tor, and Tor like, maybe you should have some magic so we can actually sell it as a fantasy, because we are a fantasy imprint. Fair enough. So that's where the light sheen of supernatural came in, which is me just kind of digging up existing beliefs of that time and making them literal. Like, everyone believes in the ancestors and fate and stuff. It's just making it into an actual thing on the page.
Which was really, really cool, because I could imagine going to Tor and they're like, maybe you should have magic in it so we have fantasy stuff to sell. Oh my gosh. But that's okay. So I am just getting like blown. I'm looking at my computer screen because I'm just getting blown up with questions and comments from our audience. So Mary Sims is back. She has a question for you, Shelley. And I'm very sorry because I probably mispronounce your characters' names constantly because it's just the way that I've said them in my head. But what was the inspiration for Wu Yang? Is that how you say it? O-U?
Oh, Ouyang.
Oh,
yeah. Ouyang, the general. Yeah. Yeah, he has no historical analog. So I have seen people wonder where he came from. He came out of my own brain just because I wanted a character like that. There were eunuchs at the time, and eunuchs play a large role in palace politics throughout Chinese history in different ways, depending on the period of history. And the Ming Dynasty had some very famous eunuch military commanders, especially like admirals. But what I was really looking for was a thematic foil for my main character, who sort of goes on this journey to discover, herself, to become herself in like the fullness of her gender identity. And that is discovering the power of stepping outside your gender box. So I needed someone who was trapped in their gender identity. And as my true protagonist rises, I needed someone else who fell. So I was like, and Chinese stories always need a good tragedy in their center. So yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so
he was just fun.
He was just fun. He just came out of your own brain, just like. Nice. All right. We have another person who's just commenting that she, Alice Poon. She's been a great fan of wushu novels since childhood. She read Jin Yang's wushu novels growing up. They're all rooted in Chinese history. Her library copy, I'm assuming, of She Who Became the Sun will be available next week, so she's really excited. They have not specified which one, but I'm assuming it's that. Also, now all right, so we have another question from Daniel Dower, which I think is for Shelley, but it could probably also be for Andrea. I'm not sure, because it doesn't specify. So he's asking, would it be fair to say you're a bit like Guy Gavriel Kay with his Tigana series, or Lions of Al Razan more accurately?
I've heard so much about. I haven't actually read Guy Gavriel Kay, but yeah, I think it is a natural comparison point. We're taking actual historical events and turning them into a secondary fantasy world. I think of Guy Gavriel Kay and Ken Liu as doing quite similar things, but I haven't actually read them, though I've heard that Lions is an amazing book and people keep recommending it to me. Yeah. Because I think his books, Guy Gavriel Kay is it called Under Heaven? Or there's one called River of Stars, something like that. And that is set on a very key event that also sort of underpins the history of my book as well, which is when one of the Chinese dynasties suffered its most humiliating defeat when the northern regimes came in and conquered their capital. And in my book, which happens several hundred years later, that capital is the key city that's being fought over. And the Chinese are this is the city we lost. This is our historical capital where we were defeated in and humiliated by. And, by regaining it, that means something to us, that historical throne. Oh, so there's a connection.
That's nice. So Neri is back. She said she needs more of Oh Young, like his childhood, and Rise to general like story. Ah, yes. So I guess Daniel Dower, I believe he agrees with you, Shelley, on everything that you just said. He did Lions of Valorzan about the fall of the Cordoba Caliphate. So no magic, just renamed the religion in it. So just did it a little differently. All right. And we have a question actually for you, Andrea, from Jenna G. So she's wondering, with multiple POVs, do you write one POV all the way through the book before starting the next POV, or do you work on all POVs at the same time?
So I kind of alternate, depending. When I'm doing revisions and rewriting things, I work on one POV at a time, but when I'm going through it, I generally work chronologically, so I switch between POVs. When I'm outlining, I do one at a time, and then I kind of interlace them together depending on where they work chronologically and story-wise. And then I'll take that outline and then work off of that. And then apparently throw it all out and realize that I want to write some different stuff. So, yeah, it's an ever-changing process, I would say.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. And so we have Helen So a question for both of you guys, actually. So do you have any advice for teen writers or things you wish you could tell your younger writer self? She's also using both your books as comp titles for, I just her book.
What would you tell your teen self? Keep writing. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a friend was like, write what you want to write what you love. Don't write what you think you should write. Like, I spent a long time thinking that I would write some super serious work of contemporary fiction about, war and, I don't know, something set in some country, and, it'd be very meaningful and important and blah, blah, blah. And I never wrote that because I didn't want to actually write that. I just thought that that's what books had to be. And I was like, can you actually write a fantasy romance? Can you write something fun, full of queer people and swords and stabbing? Actually, you can. Yes. So, write what you want to write. Have fun with it.
And write that.
I think for me, I would say definitely try to find like a group of peers that you can bounce off of as far as like ideas and your work, and also that you can commiserate with. I think it's a tough business, but I feel like the friends that I've made it all worth it in the end. Like, really, that and actually finally getting published. But I'd written like 6 books before this one, so it can sometimes take a long time. But keep at it, definitely.
God, that is.
We've got the two different approaches. Andrea wrote all 6 books, but fairly quickly. Did you say you wrote a book in several months? Because that made me die inside. Whereas I just took a really long time to write one book.
It was just the last one. It's just the Boneshard Daughter. Before that, it was taking me longer, but I thought that when I written that one quickly that I got this down now. Not the case.
All right. So Alice Poon has a question for you, Shelley. She's asking, are there many sex scenes in She Who Became the Sun?
Oh, that's awkward. I thought you were going to ask me something about Jin Yong, and I was all like prepared to like talk about like wuxia and the granddaddy of like the genre and the sex scene question. There is one, and it causes some controversy, and I don't know why. Because I come out of the fan fiction space. I come out of romance spaces. And to me, like, exploring sexuality and interpersonal relationships through that is a very natural thing to include in your manuscript. And then I accidentally wrote a book that was not a romance, but then just kind of included the stuff I normally would include in what I write. Anyway, so there is a sex scene. And my poor audio narrator had to read it out loud, and I'm so sorry for that.
It is very well
You did
done.
a good job, yeah.
Oh no, you listened to the audio, didn't you?
I did.
Oh my gosh. All right. So another question for Shelley from Neri Sims again. So she said she wants to know now about Ma, who is such a unique character, and she wants to know if she's based off anyone.
Yeah, Empress Ma is the historical wife of the Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang. And it was really funny. I was reading Iron Widow by Shiran Zhao, which is an amazing YA novel that's coming out in September, which is also based on... It's a crazy mashup of Chinese historical figures from all eras and put into giant Pacific Rim mecha robots, and it's amazing. And their book also has the same characters. So I was reading it, and like Ma pops up, and I'm like, wait, I didn't invent that character? Oh my god. It was a really weird moment to see. Anyway, so she is a historical figure, and she was... I guess her main characterization in history is that she was compassionate, and she was the one person who kind of restrained the emperor from his wildest excesses and tyrannical moments and paranoia. And she was sort of beloved by the people and was that sort of human heart of the new empire that was built by the pair of them. So that was what I drew on, like, because not much is known about these people really. So I guess that was the one seed that I retained in my book, and also Shiran retained in their book as well. So there's that sort of commonality.
That's awesome. All right. So we have another question for you, Shelley, from the audience, from Santo Miguel Perez. They say they mean this as a compliment. So because he loves both of them, do you see any parallels between your work, Shelley, and Rebecca Kwong's? She did the Poppy War series.
I haven't actually read the Poppy War, although I know Rebecca Kwong a little bit. And I didn't read it because I was writing She Who Became the Sun, at the time that the Poppy War was announced. And I was just like... At the time, there were not many Asian fantasies in the market, and there was still this worry because of the gatekeeping in publishing. There can only be one, and I was very heartbroken. I was like, oh no, the spot has been taken, and I just felt quite, sad. I was like, oh, well, I just got to keep writing what I love. Maybe there'll be room for a second book in the market. Who knows? And I was very fortunate that due to the success of the Poppy War, that space has really opened up. So, it's hugely inspiring to see like this one book. I mean, there had been Asian fantasy before because Ken Liu's book, I think, came out earlier. But I think the Poppy War was what really like opened this space and said Asian fantasies can sell. And that opened the door for my book as well. But I haven't read it. And I think a lot of people who come to read my book, they say they were huge fans of the Poppy War beforehand. So I think there must be some a similar feeling. And I know that some of what Rebecca based her book off, I think there's a little bit of some figures are historically influenced, but with sort of a gender change. Like there might be a Mao-like figure who is female in Rebecca's book. So I think there may be a bit of that that appeals, across both works.
Yeah, I haven't read the Poppy War either, although I do really want to. But I do know that it is also like a historical fantasy, I believe, based in China it's about like the opium trade, if I'm remembering correctly. So I could definitely see where there would be parallels between your work, Shelley, and hers. All right. And so now we have another comment about Ma from Madeline Schled. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that wrong, Madeline. So she said Ma is one of her favorite parts. She loves the strains of compassion and hope she weaves into the story. So that was yay. I like to see all the good things. All right. So another one from Helen Na for Shelley. Actually, she has one for Shelley and then one for you, Andrea, too, specifically. So for Shelley, would you ever write a wushu book in the vein of The Heavenly Sword and the Dragon Saber?
I was never a huge wuxia fan, but I have read... when I started writing this book, I did go back and I read some of the Jin Yong novels, and they didn't have formal English translations back then. So all the, the fan translations are a bit janky. And like you'd find one chapter here and then one chapter over there, and then the translation would break off as the translator got bored. And you'd be like, where's the rest of the story? So I kind of absorbed it in a very piecemeal way. I don't know, I have friends who know a lot more about the Chinese literary canon, and they talk a lot about how, wuxia really exemplifies a lot of Chinese philosophical thinking. It is a very sophisticated genre as well as an action-oriented genre. And I just don't have that knowledge, I think, to be able to do justice to it. I can appreciate it in TV shows, like Word of Honor is this newish TV show, Chinese drama that came out that is very much like in that vein. And I can watch it and enjoy it, but I know I'm not getting the full deep experience of, everything it's referencing, these like decades of, building this genre and all the like very complex references between the various like famous texts. So no, I'm not going to write a wuxia book. I'll just consume them.
You'll just consume them. That works too. All right. So Andrea, Helen's question for you is, she wants to know if you can give us a teaser on your next projects. Uh-oh. Can't hear you, Andrea. Have you muted yourself? Or...
No.
Oh, wait. Andrea, say something. Did you just say something? Oh, wait. I heard her a little bit. I'm seeing a little... Can you hear me? Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. Andrea, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Hold on.
Oh, wait. Bar.
We can hear you now.
We can hear you. Can you hear us? No. Did she mute? I'm seeing a little mute thing, Andrea.
No.
Can you hear us? Can you say something? No. I think, is she muted? We can't hear you. Can you hear us? So, okay, you can hear us, but we can't hear you.
Maybe we should let Andrea figure it out with the technical specialists.
Yes.
And then we...
Oh, wait. I can hear you again, Andrea. Oh, wait. No.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Oh, wait. There you are.
Oh. Okay.
Delay. All right. Can you say something?
Okay. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing that. It hasn't done that before. Okay. So about next projects, right now I'm basically trying to pull some ideas together to send to my agent. So I don't really have anything that I can speak to at the moment. It's mostly just I'm trying to untangle the third book and get that done. So hopefully soon.
All right. And so I do have another question for you, Andrea, which you might actually have to answer in the same way, from Neri Sims. She's wondering, after you finish with your trilogy, do you plan to do any standalones?
Oh, I don't know. I don't usually write standalones. I think one time I attempted to, and my agent said it had to be split into 2 books. So I kind of tend to write a little bit longer. Maybe someday if an idea comes to me that will work as a standalone, mostly I think in multi-book series though.
I totally get that. I when I write things, I have this problem where I can't write short. Like, I try, and it's just like, oh, there's too much. All right. So now another one from Neri, for both of you. She's wondering what are your favorite lines from your books?
Who can remember that? Yeah, wow.
I feel like I've gone and seen what people have highlighted when I've tried to think about like what to write on when I find things, but I've forgotten that before too. I did an in-person event recently before the Delta thing was a big deal, and I went to go sign somebody's book, and I completely forgot the phrase that I was going to sign in there. So, can you think of anything, Shelley?
No, but I was talking to another author yesterday as I went to a book signing before we got locked down again today. And he said that he had such a mental blank when he went to sign a book for someone. And he usually writes happy reading and then like a little phrase from his book. And he wrote happy birthday in the book and just died of embarrassment. And I was like, I feel you. Usually I just write like seize greatness or something like that. I can tell you what my favorite scene is.
Let's do that.
My favorite moment? No. Okay. My favorite moment is highly spoilery, because my favorite moment is the ones right at the end of the book, like each person's like end moment. But I do like there's a moment where Ju reveals herself. Oh, is that even a spoiler? Maybe I can't talk about any of my favorite moments. I wouldn't
really say that is a spoiler, because like if you read of your book, Shelley, it's pretty obvious that Ju this is a girl. Like,
yeah, like someone's gonna have to find out at some point. I think there's a moment when like Ju reveals herself to the person who will become her wife. And I guess this is not a spoiler because it is known in history, and I'm playing with a historical palette. So I guess we know who's going to end up together. It's not really like, oh, this is a romance. Will they get together or not get together? It's like, how did they get together? But like in showing herself as someone who's not a man to Ma, and she's like, do you want this? And what she's saying is like, not, do you want this body I have? But it's more like, do you want the freedom of like stepping outside of your gender? Which I thought was like, I was like, oh, that moment is kind of why I wrote the book. It's, Ju is this sort of wish fulfillment figure, someone who can like step outside of the role that they were given and like saying to someone else, hey, I can do it. Like, do you want to do it too? You felt so trapped. You were given this position that you hate. Maybe, you can do it if you're brave enough. Just step outside.
So, do you have a favorite scene from your book, Andrea? Maybe that makes it a little broader, so it's not like
a little. I think I think for me, it's kind of like the gradual realization of Jovis that this little creature that he's picked up has become important to him. So Jovis is the smuggler character in my book, and he's quite grumpy. He's searching for his missing wife, and that's like the only thing that's important to him. And he saves this little creature from drowning, and at first he's like trying to just foist it off on other people. And then he lets it come along with him. But, all the while he's like thinking like this isn't permanent. And then, there's like a moment where Mephi, this little creature, jumps into his lap, and then he suddenly feels kind of like he's surfacing in a way. And I just like that moment because I have heard so many stories about people who are saying like, we are not taking that cat in, or we're not taking that dog. And, like a month later or 2 weeks later, 2 days later, that creature is sleeping in their lap and has taken over the home. And I feel like it's kind of a relatable experience where you may not be looking for that companionship, but it's found you anyways.
That's so beautiful. Oh.
What's your favorite animal companion story out of like there is such a beloved thing in fantasy books, the animal companion. Do you have a favorite other one?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I really like Night Eyes in the Royal Assassin trilogy by Robin Hobb. That I think was a big influence for me. I mean, there's so many though, like the blue sword with her horse, and she's got a cool hat too. Like, I just loved reading those when I was growing up. I wasn't allowed to have pets so for a while.
I like literally just cracked. Today, I've been like saying no pets in this household. And then today on the 6th lockdown that Melbourne has, I'm like, I've cracked. Okay, get a dog. I don't care.
All right. So here are some more questions coming in. So for Jenna G, for Andrea, magic inspired by computer code sounds like a cool mashup of both sci-fi and fantasy. Did you take any inspiration from science fiction works when creating your story?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the first science fiction book that I read was this really old tattered copy of iRobot in my dad's basement office area. And I really loved kind of the logic puzzles that were in that, in addition to some of the ethical questions. So I definitely wanted to bring some of that sci-fi flavor into my book, where you do have, these constructs that are programmed by these shards in them. And then sometimes these commands can contradict, and bad things can happen because of that, or you can make your way around a construct by kind of subverting its commands. So I did want to bring some of that in, as well as some of the ethical things about when does a construct become, conscious, at what point. So yeah.
That's all right. So, and then another question coming in, this one from someone named Ka Vangfor, for both of you. If you could do one thing differently, I'm assuming in your writing, what would you do and why?
Yeah. That's a hard one. Probably a lot less research. It's been because Andrea, you're talking about going down rabbit holes. Do you like going down the rabbit holes of research?
I sometimes a little bit, but there's also the times where I, realize an hour has passed and I haven't actually done any writing. I'm looking at something that's completely unrelated that I'm never going to use. Yeah. I mean, when you were asking before what's harder, I would always say historical fantasy, which is why I don't write it. So, take the easier path.
Oh, I find that harder, the creating things wholesale. That said, I have spent many hours looking at what do Mongols wear under their robes, and looking up archaeological reconstructions of Chinese underwear from the 14th century. I'm just oh, who cares, I would have liked to have gone to China, actually, to visit some of the places, but of course they don't really exist anymore. I was Google Earthing one of the beautiful hunting grounds where the Mongols used to go to do hunting, and it's like a coal mine today. So I'm it's gone forever.
I mean, they still do have a lot of really beautiful temples. And
they
palaces.
do, yeah.
So many temples.
Sometimes I had a friend who went, and they were oh, we went to this ancient, beautiful place, and then we realized it was all a reconstruction made in concrete, and it was the same place that this beautiful temple had been, but it was not the original. It was it wasn't even that kind of, we've replaced all the bits gradually over centuries. That the ship of, what's that ship analogy where replace
I know what you're talking about,
the same ship.
I don't remember that either. Yeah.
Anyway, it wasn't even like that. It was concrete. So anyway,
I think for me,
Andrea, yeah.
For me, what I would do differently is probably just be more organized. It's a constant woe of mine where I started a wiki, but then I forget to add things to it. So instead of doing research, I'm trying to look at my own stuff because I'm trying to remember what I did in it, and what the names of the islands are, and I'm very thankful for that map. Yeah, I mean, people have said it's very beautiful, and it is, but I refer to it a frightening amount. So yes.
And you have a really stunning map as well by Malaysian illustrator, right? Charis?
Yes. It's really wonderful. I sent my little chicken scratch, like, this is where things are, and got back this like beautiful, gorgeous illustrated map.
Oh, that's so cool. Right. So, Neri Sims is back with another question for both of you. She's wondering, is there an author that is your automatic book buy?
Andrea's smiling, you know.
I don't know. I'm like trying to think. Like, I mean, there's a lot that I'll pick up, but I also like just buy so many that my TBR list is so big. I don't know if I have like an auto buy one. Like, I love Robin Hobb, but I haven't read the final book in her most recent trilogy because I know it's going to make me cry. Like, so I haven't bought it yet. Like, it's like that.
I guess I have a bunch of auto buys. But they're across all random genres. Like, I don't know if you want to hear about them. Like I really love Garth Greenwell, who writes these. He's a gay author of sort of contemporary kind of auto fiction, less often based on his experiences being gay in Bulgaria as an English teacher. They're the most incredible works of exploring desire and all its facets, and about being queer and like all the ugly raw edges and, you know, the failure to connect between people when you like hook up. I don't, anyway, that's a really bad description of it. Anyway, I love his work. I've never read anything like it. So I buy everything. But then also I auto buy a lot of romance. Like Olivia Dade, who wrote Spoiler Alert. I love her stuff. So I buy everything.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, try working in a bookstore and like, yeah, you just buy everything. Like, is like, I always tell people, it's like, yeah, you're going to win the battle, but you will never win the war. You will eventually walk out of here with like your entire paycheck in your books. Oh my goodness. All right. So another question from Santo Miguel Perez for both of you. Do you find that during your writing process, characters evolve to be completely different than you originally imagined them?
Yes. That's an easy question for me to answer. I wrote so many drafts. It's really hard. So I was originally inspired by this character, who, you know, the Hongwu Emperor, who was a real person. But like there's this fundamental mystery at his core, which is what really attracted me to him in the first place. That's how can someone who's a peasant and has only ever known what it is to be a peasant in this like grubby, famine-ridden, drought-ridden village in the middle of bloody nowhere in the middle of China possibly imagine becoming the emperor? It's just a leap of the imagination that seems absurd. But you know, that seed of greatness in someone is really interesting to think about and explore. I guess you see it in characters like Alexander the Great in the Mary Renaud amazing historical fantasy books also. But when it came to designing a character like that myself, like putting my own spin, it's really hard to find like, you know, what's the core of a character? And it took me so many tries to get that right, to find someone who was that perfect balance. I thought it worked, of, you know, ambition, but likability. And the first couple of tries, it was just, I came out complete sociopath. Like this was an extremely terrible character, and it just like didn't work. So, you know, it took a lot of iterations through. Like my plot of my book always stays the same, but I was trying to find a person in there that kind of sort of fulfilled all the requirements, who would make the story kind of feel coherent. And like, yeah, and sometimes you can only do that by discovering, which was a strange surprise to me because I think of myself as a planner. But it's just, yeah, so not the person I ever imagined at the start.
Nice.
I think for me, I start out with kind of a vague idea of who I want these people to be and what their motivations are. And it usually takes me like writing a few chapters to kind of pin some stuff down. Like with Jovis, I knew I wanted to write kind of like a Han Solo character in a way where he's a smuggler and, you know, he jokes around a lot. But I also knew I wanted him to have kind of like a tragic past. So, which I guess like Han Solo does if you've watched like the new movie, but you were not aware of any of this when you're watching like the original trilogy. But I know when I started out writing him, he was a little bit more flippant and had a little less depth. So kind of a lot of times when I'm writing, I'll be figuring out some more of their backstory. I always do that thing before I start writing where you do the character sheets where you're like, this is what they want and this is their past and things like that. But I find often while I'm writing, I kind of discover a little bit more about them. And that's one of the things that I'll do on like the next pass through is go through and like strengthen those motivations and clarify the character's background.
Nice.
Oh, you actually do the homework. You do the character sheets.
I do.
I love that.
It never works out the way that I want it to. Just like the
I tried doing that, but it is always ended in disaster. Because I always say that in the writing books. Yeah, write out the character sheet and try and figure out who they are. But sometimes you got to like see them on the page, like talking and walking around to kind of know them.
Yeah, I feel like I'm sadly consistently convinced that someday I will write the book perfectly from the start. But it hasn't happened that way yet.
The dream.
I too cling to that dream, Andrew. I too cling to it. Like one day we'll have mastered it.
Someday.
All right, we have another comment from Helen Nall. She really resonated with the exploration of identity within both of your books, with Lynn's hope to live up to her father's expectation and Ju defying societal expectations and embracing her autonomy. And actually, that brings up something that I wanted to talk about too, with the different identity issues here. Because Shelley, if I'm remembering this correctly, your main character, we never actually learn what her like given name is, because the name that she uses for most of the book is actually her dead brother's name. Is that like, and then so like, and she gets introduced initially as the Zhu family's second daughter. I'm like, well, that's not a name. Like the place you are in the family. And so like that name, whatever that was, is literally nothing, because she becomes this other person. So she kind of creates her own self. And then with Lynn, in the beginning, like she has this like memory loss. So she can only be whatever it is that her father is telling her, well, this is who you were. So it's a very interesting, both of yours is a very interesting like identity, almost I don't know if it's an identity crisis necessarily, but it's an interesting take on what is identity, what are names, all that stuff. Was that something that was like, I'm assuming planned in some form? Was that, because that's like a main part of both your books.
It was
the funny
definitely.
Thing,
oh, you go ahead.
No, you go first. You sounded much more like you knew what you wanted to say.
No, it was definitely a theme that I wanted to have for my book. I have had that experience of growing up and like trying to meet parental expectations. I don't think either of my parents thought that I was going to be a writer. They're both immigrants, and it was like you go to school for something practical, and your math and your science grades are the most important. You want to be like a doctor or a lawyer, engineer, right?
Oh my God, that is too relatable.
Yeah. So, for me, it was like kind of an interesting experience, like wanting to be like an artist or a writer, growing up in a family where that was not really like valued. So, I mean, they're over it now. Once you start making money at it, then it's like, okay, she can survive. But yeah, so that was something I wanted to explore where, Lynn has these very certain expectations placed on her by her father, and she's not sure if that's who she wants to be or who she actually is.
That's good.
I relate to that so much. I was just like, oh, we're like the same person. I definitely got told, doctor, lawyer, or engineer, pick one. And then it's like, but what about the writing? What about my English major? No. So I became a mechanical engineer, and yeah, like, I mean, look where that got me. The funny thing about like Chinese naming is that back in the olden days, the second daughter of the Zhu family could very well have been your name. You would just be like, yeah, I'm not saying that necessarily was that character's name, because I like the fact I wanted to start on that mythic note where we never know her original identity because it doesn't really matter. She leaves it behind. And she goes on this epic journey to, grow into herself, her true self, to find out what it is. And it's, beyond, what anyone would have ever given her back in the day. But yeah, I have like plenty of aunties who I'm like, oh, 9th auntie, 10th auntie, whatever, stuff like that. You kind of, relational position in the family is quite important. But yeah, I definitely wanted to write a book about identity. And for me, I guess it's about Asian identity, but it's much more so about gender identity. In my case, that was like the driving, like, why do you want to write a book? I wanted to write a book about, what it is to be told you're a girl, to be told you're nothing, and then to be like, well, screw you. I'm going to be who I'm going to be. And you don't put me in this box. And to explore, what it means to kind of be in between, to something you've been told as a weakness your entire life, and like it becomes this hidden thing about you, and then you turn it into your strength. So I do have a character who, her gender queerness is her strength, like gender is her superpower. No one knows, who she was born as, and then she'll use that to screw you over in cunning ways. But then also I have the other character where, it's his weakness. Like he clings to his toxic masculinity because he's been denied his masculinity. Everyone looks at him and is like, "Oh, you're so pretty. You're like a girl. Aren't you beautiful?" Like even the people that he really looks up to and loves, they so try and squash him down into this thing that he knows he's not. So that's what this book is about.
Nice. I did really like that, and I do like the idea. I did not know necessarily. I kind of thought that maybe that could have been something that was done in 14th century China with girls, where it's just like, oh, the second daughter of the Zhu family, and that could be. But I much more like the idea of it being this mythic thing where like she had a name, but we never know it because it doesn't matter because she recreates herself, and it's this awesomeness. So before we are getting to pretty late, so I don't want to keep you guys, but I do like to ask, because especially with fantasy, and I am a bookseller, so fantasy obviously attracts very voracious readers. They just blow through books. So my question is, once they've blown through your books and while they're waiting for the next ones in your series, do you have any recommendations for people like to read in the interim once they're done with yours?
I would say The Jasmine Throne. If they like both of our books, they would definitely like The Jasmine Throne because I feel like it covers some similar themes for both of ours. So yeah, it was amazing. I loved that book so much.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was like my answer to that question. I was like, how dare you steal it, Andrea? No, but it works perfectly. The Jasmine Throne is amazing. It's really, like I just read it. I was like, wow, you haven't put a foot wrong. Tasha Daniel, you wrote the book I wanted to write. It is that a scream of rage against the patriarchy, like really engaging with the classic canon, in her case, the Hindu epics. And it's just masterful. So that's 580 pages of, solid rage and burning down the patriarchy. It's great. But also very tender as well. It's got some really beautiful moments.
Oh my gosh. All right. So, oh my goodness. I just got loaded with a ton of audience questions. Some people, I guess they almost missed it. So they want to not miss it. So if you guys are okay to answer some of these, because there are quite a few of them now, if you want. All right.
Let's do a quick fire session. We'll try and be short.
All right. So for both of you, and it's I know Andrea mentioned having a writing group, but did you both send your manuscripts to beta readers or have critique partners?
Oh yeah, definitely. I have a group of friends that we try to get together every year, and we read each other's manuscripts and have like a little party. So, and then also just like other friends online I'll exchange work with.
I think it's like absolutely vital, like to have someone who also knows what you're trying to aim for, who like really understands what you're trying to achieve. Because like many people can read your book, but they won't always like know exactly what you're trying to say. And like being surrounded by friends who at the very, get-go know what you're trying to achieve, like means that you can sort of, it just helps to have that cheerleading as well. They're like, I know what you're trying to do, you're not quite there. Here are some ways you can get the effect you're after. Was so important.
Nice. All right. And that one I just saw it was one from, it looks like Daniel Roman is saying, I'm guessing this is a recommendation called a book called Ship of Theseus.
Oh, that's because that's the thing that we're talking about, the ship that every plank gets replaced. The Ship of Theseus, and we should have known because it was on WandaVision.
Yeah, it's a philosophical.
It slipped out of minds. But thank you, Daniel.
Yes. All right. Alex W. question for you, Shelley. They're really interested in your decision around pronouns, and if you had any difficulties with that, especially with you and how they shift around based on perspective.
Yeah, I like the slippery aspect of changing the use of pronouns depending on who's viewing Ju or what she's thinking of herself. Because I guess the book explores a lot of gender as a performance. So I think that highlights the performative aspect, how people see you, but then in contrast to how you perceive yourself. But at the same time, I was really conscious that Middle Chinese, I guess, which is what they're ostensibly speaking back then, didn't have gendered pronouns. Well, the standard third-person pronoun, which today has become the male pronoun. But back then, there was not a separate female pronoun. So I was sort of like, it was a bit of a weird one. Some people have asked me, how should we refer to your characters? They are very much genderqueer. Should we call them they? Would they today use the they pronoun? But it's sort of hard to know. And I do find it's really readers bring their own interpretations as well, based on the pronouns. Like I find a lot of the fan art of Ouyang makes him more masculine than in my head I thought of him as. And I think that's because he has a male pronoun, and that is very much how he thinks of himself. So that is correct for him. But yeah, it's just, I like playing in that muddy, messy gray area, and pronouns are a fun way to sort of unsettle things.
That is awesome. All right. And here is a question from Daniel Roman again for both of you. He wants to know, now that you're deep into writing sequels, has your process had to change at all? And do you have any tips for keeping your writing / world building organized on the back end?
So my process has changed a lot. I mean, the first book I outlined, I wrote it. I had not too many revisions to do. The second book I outlined, I wrote it. I re-outlined some of it, rewrote about a third of it. And the third book, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in the despair phase right now before it all starts to make sense. But at least I've done this enough times that I know that's the phase I'm in. As far as keeping organized, I have been using Plotter and Scrivener, and then also SlimWiki. And so I'll have world details in my SlimWiki, and Plotter I have plot stuff, and then Scrivener is just mostly organizing my actual manuscript. It sounds organized when I say it. But if somebody who were not me were to go in and look at these things, they'd have no idea what was going on. So
I feel for those people who pick up series of people who passed away, like Robert Jordan, and then there's a Brandon Sanderson who had to leap into the fray. Can you imagine this really world that's been built over 12 books or whatever, and then you're write book 13, pick up all the threads of anyway. I'm so not organized. I don't have any organization system. Yeah, I just do a lot of reading and then it lives in my head. And then I guess I try and spit it out into a book. And then I refuse to read what I've already written. So like I haven't read book 1 since, I finished it. Or since I did the proofs, I think was the last time I ever looked at it, which does make for a bit of a hard time sometimes for continuity for book 2. But I can't bear to look at something I've finished. So
I am the same way. It's hard.
I guess because it's done, it's dead, and you can't change it anymore. And maybe it wasn't perfect or whatever. I wish I was more organized, and occasionally I'll go through my computer and just sort of randomly. Also, I write everything in Apple Notes in a completely disorganized way. I just have a thought and I put it in Apple Notes. So I've got like 6,000 random notes, and that's my system, I guess. And sometimes I'll look through them and go, oh, can I categorize by tag? Is this like something about history or language or whatever? But nah.
Two very different approaches, but basically it's whatever works for you, right? All right. So Neri Sims is back with a couple more questions. Where is your favorite place to write?
Not my house, not anymore. After living in it for like 2 years without leaving. I used to really enjoy writing in cafes, like really early in the morning. And I just started doing this again, like literally this last week. I've been like, reality, like normal life has resumed. I'm so happy. I'll get up in the morning and go write, early from like 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. And that's my like writing time. And then we got locked down again. I'm like, God damn. So I sit in the beanbag in my room resentfully. Sometimes I used to sit in the cupboard and write during the pandemic. So,
Yeah, I used to really love writing in cafes as well. Right now, I write at my sister's place because we share childcare. So I just go over there. And thankfully, she's not far away. But it's not like my favorite place to write. I think if I were to take into account productivity, I would say like on airplanes because there's no internet unless you pay for it. And I'm too cheap to pay for it. So I usually get a lot of work done on airplanes, which is... I try to replicate that by turning off the internet in the mornings and writing, but sometimes I'm not strong enough. So, like the forced no internet.
I'm impressed that you're not freaked out by people seeing your screen as you write on a plane. I'm always like, but my neighbor's right next to me and I'm writing like a spicy scene or something, or even just like seeing my crap words. I'm like, don't look at my crap words on my screen.
Usually they're doing their own thing, so I'm like,
Oh my gosh. All right. So Neri, one more question from her. She's wondering if your book was made into a mini series, who would you choose to pick for your main lead to play them?
I can't answer this because I actually had face casts for a bunch of the characters, and it took me so long to write this book. They've all aged out of the roles, so I think you need a fresh young crop of C-drama actors, and I don't know them anymore.
This is one of those questions that I've gotten multiple times, and I can never remember my answer to it. I actually don't have any people in mind when I'm writing them. I know some authors do, or they'll put together like a little like cast list kind of thing so they can have something to refer to as far as like what their characters look like. But I'm not that good at this kind of thing. And I never like remember who the actors are. Like it, so I had a list before because somebody had asked me this in a written interview, but I don't remember who it was anymore.
Well, basically, we want the other people to make those beautiful trailers, with all the actors already like in there with the music and the transitions. That's what I like to see.
Yeah.
Don't make me imagine it.
Watch both of these as mini-series or movies or whatever. Like someone needs to do that. Someone watching, do that. Go do that. All right. And then just, I have a comment from Misty306 who came in a little bbit late. But they're really excited. They're glad that they got to see this, some of it live stream. They say, I enjoy how the theme of the rebellious female is resurfacing again. As a Black woman, I can relate to how these characters feel. Society views you one way, and you have to fight societal norms in order to make things better for yourself. That was just a nice comment, I thought. All right. So we are close to wrapping up here. I promise this will be my very last question. And it is one of mine. I just want to know, because again, going back to books, for each of you, what is one of the most recent books you've read and enjoyed?
I just finished a couple of books. One was City of Lies by Sam Hawke. I really enjoyed that one. It's a lot of political intrigue. It's got these two sibling characters, which I have two siblings, and I thought that their relationship was really well drawn and that they love each other, but they're still kind of annoyed with each other. And they're kind of uncovering this conspiracy while they're also under attack. So it's very exciting. Another one was The Final Strife. That one's not coming out until, I think 2022 maybe. So just keep it in mind though, because it was incredible. It's again, that rebellious female, but it's a chosen one who has kind of missed her destiny. And I just thought it was a really, really interesting way that it was done and a very cool world. So.
Nice.
I could also recommend something that's not coming out till fall 2022, but that might annoy people. I don't know. But I'm obsessed with Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh. Emily wrote, I think, Silver in the Wood, which is a novella, part of a 2-book novella series.
I love
which
that
I really
book.
loved. Yeah, and her new book is stunning. It just blew my mind. It's this incredible space opera featuring a buff female super soldier who's just the best military trainee of this tiny little scrap of humanity that's clinging to this desolate asteroid that's fighting off the aliens. Or is it? You go on this incredible journey of just hate this character. She's the worst. She's the most insufferable person. And then you gradually realize that the world she's living in is built on lies and it's this horrific, oppressive regime, actually. And you go on this incredible journey with her of discovery that there's more of the world out there than she realized. And I've never gone from hating someone so much, just being behind them 100%, just going, you go. Bring down that terrible society. As it's also the sort of strong female breaking down the patriarchy. You're refusing the place that you've been given. It's incredible.
Yes, I do. And I do know Emily Tish's her other book. So while we're waiting for that one to come out, Shelley, we can read Silver in the Wood. And I know there's a sequel to it, and I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called now. But it's drowning.
The drowned something. The drowned island?
Guys.
I don't know.
First one is definitely Silver in the Woods. So all right. So that was really awesome with all the questions from the audience. Thank you guys. And just a little plug and reminder, you can get both She Who Became the Sun and the Boneshard Daughter at the Town Book Center. You can come into the store. You can call us. You can order it online. Also, with She Who Became the Sun, with your purchase of the book, you will get this beautiful signed book plate from Shelley, which is just so pretty, isn't it? So beautiful. All right. And then also, don't forget the Boneshard Daughter, because no one should ever forget it. And also remember, you can pre-order the Boneshard Emperor, the sequel to this, on our website right now. So exciting. All right. So that is it for us tonight. Thank you all so much for all your input and all the questions. And it was so great. And Shelley, Andrea, thank you both so much for being here. It was a really great time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye.